Welcome to Newshour. Baku Climate Action Week has just finished. 5 days that brought together leaders from government, business, academia, and of course, the United Nations. Organisers of COP29 in Baku and COP30 in Belém, Brazil, plus a wide range of experts from many other countries in between, all united by one task: turning climate ambition into intensive action now. And at the heart of it was Melini Mera, curator of Baku Climate Action Week and chief executive at Globe International. She's a scholar, CEO and organiser who's had a profound impact on turning ambition into action, whether here in Baku, London, Rio, or any one of a myriad of other projects where she's been a leading light. In this special interview, we ask what has made Baku's week different, what lessons can be drawn for regions facing the transition challenge, and how citizens can become partners in this fight against climate change. Well, Melini, it's great to sit down with you. We've been stood up together for most of the week, jointly emceeing this incredible event. Tell me about how this time it was different, how Baku Climate Action Week took a different approach this time.
So first of all, we're still in the middle of it. Not quite in the middle, we're towards the end of it, so we're not quite finished. But it was different for a number of reasons. First of all, you and I were there together as MCs. It was a departure from the way we normally organise these events by having a member of the media sharing the pain and the joy. But in terms of the way we organised it, it was the same in a sense that we had the professional organisation that we have in Baku. Yeah, the way in which we stretched it was we had new themes. So when we organise climate action weeks, we talk about it being whole of state and whole of society. So this year we had many more state departments who were involved. So that was very much a kind of whole of state for us. So we had the Labour Ministry, we had the Health Ministry, and traditionally for these kind of discussions, you invite the Environment Ministry, the Foreign Affairs, Economics, etc. So for us it was important to stretch that envelope. Secondly, it was very horizontal. So we had a lot more engagement from different civil society organizations. We talk a lot about the importance of education. And typically when we discuss education, it's universities. But this year we were really delighted to engage primary level, kindergarten level, children of different needs and abilities, as well as the tech whizzes and the innovators who are there in the higher education sector. So those were a couple of the ways in which we did it differently this year. I
have to say as well that that's diversity that you mentioned was very apparent. You know, there were high-level government ministers, there were also business people, younger people, older people, a strong focus on women, which was obviously important and interesting, and a lot of diving down into detail as well. I mean, I think for years we've heard in this space about, you know, it's time for action, move out of rhetoric and, you know, into getting things done. But for the first time I started to notice very, very detailed maps and data sheets and specific projects that were being spoken about. And for me, that was definitely one of the highlights.
Well, thank you for noting the diversity. That was very much by design. So we wanted to make sure that there were the people who typically take part in these kind of policy dialogues. So, you know, the former presidents, prime ministers, ministers, the current senior decision makers in a country, but also the people who are just getting on and doing stuff, the practitioners. So there were a lot more practitioners in the room from various different sectors. So, you know, from, as I've mentioned, health, transport, development, green finance, etc. We heard from them, and that's important because we are beyond the stage that we need another roadmap. We have those roadmaps. So COP29 last year was very clear about its action agenda. So when you have a presidency identifies its own priorities and sets that out as this is our action plan. We want to cover these kind of issues. And last year's, so the COP29 presidency last year had 14 key items on their agenda. And this year we heard not just, well, this is what we intend to do, but this is what we are doing. And so that's where the focus on action and implementation was very much visible and foregrounded this year.
Yeah, I certainly noticed that. There was no sense of basking in the success of Baku, the Baku breakthrough, as it's been termed. And there were a lot of speakers that were saying very frankly, well, it's about what we can do now. It's not even about what we can do getting closer to COP30 in Belém. It's like, there are things to do now. We need to kind of get our, all hands to the pump, so to speak.
There is. And, this, it's very clear. You get the feeling being now in Baku that last year was such a game changer. Organising COP29 meant that all government departments had been invited to contribute to this new green agenda. And what we saw is that there are some ministries and some sectors of the economy here who have been doing that for quite some time. Energy transition is taking place. It's been taking place over the last decade or so. So now it's reaching the point that the key people in the energy sector want to showcase what they're doing. For example, the success that they're having in reducing methane flares from oil fields, gas flares from oil fields, and the way in which they're bringing in new technology, satellite technology, for example, to help accomplish that. And then there were others who were just beginning that journey. Yeah, so I think in particular in terms of education. So we had a lot of emphasis on the need for knowledge, skills, values for a new world in which the workforce of today is going to look very different, what it's going to be like in the next 5 to 10 years with the advance of AI and digital technologies, So we're preparing for a new world. And I think that was very much the atmosphere that we had this year. It wasn't resting on your laurels. This is what we did last year. We'd done and dusted with COP29. Let's move on to the next big conference. No, it is all about the legacy. It's all about putting the hard yards in and making sure implementation is happening and people can see the change.
Yeah, and so many different areas, sectors focused on agriculture, water. I mean, water scarcity is a topic that's hit the headlines, but it's quite rare that people sort of go deep on the debate, on the discussion about how to solve the issue. There were experts talking not just about desalination, but about all sorts of other supporting initiatives that can really help make sure that this isn't the enormous catastrophic problem that it looks like it could be. Tell me about agriculture, tell me about water, and particularly the expertise that you've seen being developed in this region.
So, smart strategies for managing the challenge of water security and agricultural security, because the two are very obviously linked, is something that we spent quite some time on last year, because it was part of the presidency's own action agenda. And this year, we heard of a number of advances, particularly in terms of collaborations with other institutions. So, for example, the Agro-Innovation Fund. There is the Agro-Innovation Fund in Azerbaijan. They spoke about the ways in which they're deploying new technologies, new strategies, engaging much more effectively with farmers. So how you can work upstream and downstream, how you can create tools that support farmers to understand when the weather is changing, when particular crop needs to be planted in real time, to enable them to understand the developments that there are in helping them understand, for example, disease, pests. Yeah, so there are new apps that we heard about, and some of them are being developed by young people in Azerbaijan at the universities over here. So for agriculture and water security, both of these issues are well established as very much high priority for the institutions to respond to. There was a lot of information and some very good practice shared there. What was new is the recognition that one can't succeed on either of these issues, particularly in terms of water resource management, because you are in a shared basin. So the issue of needing to work with your neighbor much more effectively becomes much more important. So there was greater attention to the networks that are now being established for managing this transboundary challenge.
Yeah, and that's something that I've noticed living in Azerbaijan over the last year is the geography drives that geopolitical dexterity. The two are interlinked, and the partnerships, the collaboration over this last week, not just big companies, but smaller ones too. And actually for me that was quite interesting that we heard from the big brands. I mean, a lot of them were here, but we also zoned in on this reality that over 90% of all businesses are small, medium-sized enterprises. I often used to say when I was in the UK that really the majority of the business sector are on these industrial parks that you drive past on the motorway, and they're sort of family-run, medium-sized factories and things like that. So for me, it was fascinating to see the ministers acknowledging that and talking about how support, encouragement, ideas, innovation can support those smaller companies too.
Actually, the small and medium enterprise sector of the economy is one that was flagged as a key priority for this presidency last year, and in particular through the high-level champion, Negar Padarai. So these high-level champions, that they are responsible not for the negotiations, they're responsible for the engagement with the non-state actors.
Well, actually, sorry to interrupt, one of the things I found out as well, which I perhaps should have realised sooner, is they actually have a lot of work to do. This is not just a grandiose...
They're kept very busy. And the thing is, so they have a program of work, and they have a degree of flexibility for identifying what their priority is going to be. And what was quite remarkable about COP29 is that you had the high-level champion who made it very clear that her priority was in supporting the SMEs. Because as you say, they are in virtually every country the majority of enterprises. And they have typically been neglected in the climate discussion, because climate, the focus in terms of the private sector has been on the large companies. Because the assumption was, quite correctly, that they can make large-scale impacts. Yeah, they can move faster than others, they have resources, they can work collectively, they have these long supply chains. But it's the small and medium enterprises that are the backbone of the economy. They're the ones that employ the largest number of people. They're the ones that families are reliant on for their livelihood security. So it was really refreshing to see this and to work with the COP29 high-level champion, with CORBIA, which is of course the national federation, and we partnered very well with them when we organized London Climate Action Week, because there is now an international focus within the UN on supporting climate-smart SMEs. And actually this year, if you permit me, because you asked, so what's new and different? We brought over the CORBIA equivalent from Brazil, SEBRAE. So this is a very large federation of SMEs in Brazil. They have a number of resources and ways in which they support small businesses in various different sectors. Yeah, so from manufacturing to agriculture to transportation to prepare for the climate transition, the energy transition, to manage their resources, including water, much more efficiently. So we were able to have that exchange between the incoming presidency and the current presidency and how they can support their businesses, their SMEs, much more effectively. And that was one of the highlights for me of this Baku Climate Action Week.
And you mentioned London, you mentioned Brazil as well. London and Rio Climate Action Weeks, you've been at the heart of both of those two events as well as Baku. Are the events kind of connecting up in an effective way now? Have you noticed that the different events around the world are having a sort of synergistic effect on each other?
Yeah, I mean, that's the intention. So when we started London Climate Action Week in 2019, so we've had our 7th London Climate Action Week this year, the intention was to work to support the COP presidency. So when we started it in London, it was the year that the United Kingdom hosted COP26. So we wanted to make sure that that policy dialogue, which typically is within the bubble, the climate bubble we call it, we wanted it to break out of the climate bubble. We wanted there to be a better, deeper public understanding of what it meant to host a COP and why it was important, and most importantly, how ordinary people could get involved in it. So that was the ethos behind London Climate Action Week, and it was one of the reasons why we were invited to partner with Baku Climate Action Week, because we wanted to use that as a mobilization moment, a focal point before the COP. And it turned out that it was a really ingenious way of engaging the multiple sectors in society. So we're doing that similarly with Brazil hosting the COP. We organized Rio Climate Action Week in August. And the ways in which they work together is that we very much want to build on one week to the next. So we look at it programmatically. So I mentioned the importance of the small and medium enterprise sector, because unless you're able to support those, you're really not going to have the cut through. You're not going to have the economic transition at scale where it matters. People can feel it. And so we had Sebrai also involved with us, so we had a complementary programming for both London and Rio, and we picked up on that elements of that in Baku. Now, having said that, it's very important to recognize that there are differences in every country. There are differences in every city. So there are particular demographics that are more engaged. There are particular sectors that are more relevant for that, for that country. So there is variation, and we welcome that variation. This week, we also have Bangkok Climate Action Week, which is taking place. So the key thing is that we have this momentum, which is building, that this is a global movement of climate action, which is now embedded in cities and in regions. And people are engaging in a way that they haven't before because it's present, it's near for them, it's meaningful for them. It's not a far-off UN or an international event that they have no connection to. So we've made it more relevant for people's lives, I think.
And some of the criticism that the movement has received in the past has been around this idea of it being high profile but low impact. From what you're saying, from what I've seen, we're now moving out of a period where any of that criticism could have been valid and actually starting to deliver impact on the ground right now, when and where it matters.
Yeah, I mean, we're heading into our 30th COP30. So this is a discussion that's been taking place at the national and international level for many, many years. But why we were so keen to organize these climate action weeks is because too often it's remained at that level. It's remained at the national level. It hasn't come down to the state, province, or critically the local city or town level. And that's what we do. We bridge that gap by actually organizing these events and making it very easy for people to engage with them. Now, one of the things that's really important this year is that the national climate plans, which have been adopted since the Paris Agreement in 2015, actually have to embrace all economic sectors. And they have to engage all stakeholders. So this year at Baku Climate Action Week, we brought the citizen activists, the civil society organizations, together with the parliamentarians. Because the parliamentarians are now looking at what do these climate plans mean for us in terms of creating legislation, creating laws. So that's one of the things that's really nice to see in Azerbaijan, that there are new laws in place now on energy efficiency. So when you're talking about green building, there's a lot of talk in Baku about green building, that it's not voluntary, it becomes mandatory, it becomes part of the regulatory and legal framework. So these are the ways in which we're moving away from talk to action.
And finally, just staying with Azerbaijan, I mean, by the time next year's event comes around, lots of things will have happened. Some of it we can predict, some of it, frankly, we can't. We will have been to Belém and come back again. What are you anticipating next year's Baku Climate Action Week to look and feel like?
So there are a couple of points there. Next year is going to be very busy. So beyond COP, next year Baku is going to be hosting the World Urban Forum in May. It's also going to be hosting the World Environment Day celebrations. And, we know how busy the Baku is in terms of big events that take place. I think a key challenge for us is to make sure that relevant events are connecting with one another. So Baku famously has been hosting the Energy Week and the Water Week. Yeah. So what we don't want to do is to replicate the dialogue. Yeah. So next year, I hope that we will be able to consolidate some of the conversations, but importantly, the commitments that are coming out of these encounters, and use that as an audit point. So if I look at what we're doing in London with London Climate Action Week, we use every London Climate Action Week as a review and audit point to hold the institutions accountable, to say to our city leaders, this is what you said you were going to do last year, show us your progress reports. So that's the discipline that we want to bring to bear. So every year, year on year, you can show progress, and that builds confidence, and confidence helps bring people along, builds trust.
Well, Malini, I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you this week. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your passion, not just here on stage at the event, but also now with our viewers on AnewZ. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, we've heard from Malini Meha reflecting on Baku Climate Action Week, where the focus was not just diplomacy, but practical action, inclusion and community. As climate change touches every aspect of life, these forums seek to turn words into impact. Well, that is all from this edition of Newshour Special. From all of us here at AnewZ, thanks for being with us.